Welcome, everybody. Really excited to talk with everybody today. Great panelists, and we all have talked a few times about what they're all doing in terms of training. And as we know, training is a big component right now of finding the talent, keeping the talent, and growing the talent. So excited to share with that. We want this to be interactive. It's a small group, so we will ask you to ask questions and be part of the panel with us and share any great ideas that you're doing in your stores or in your organization. And I'm going to let everybody introduce themselves, but my name is Fleming Ford, and I'm not a car dealership. It's kind of how I got into automotive, is because when I was with a consulting company, I could actually get into every GM because they thought I was doing a dealer trade. And so I ended up with a lot of automotive clients really early in my career and have, like everyone else, you get sucked in. So I work with NCM and Associates, and we are building out a whole people platform to go with our operational platform. So, this is really passionate to me to really focus on the people, which is why ASOTU is such a great partner, because I think it's the people that make this business what it is. So, Grace?
My name is Grace Looney. I'm the Director of Brand Experience at Bozard Ford Lincoln. And one of our big projects this year is creating Bozard University, which is the umbrella that goes over all of the learning and development that happens at our store. So it's a really fun project.
And I am David Faribaugh. This is my 27th year in the auto industry. A couple different OEMs, some data suppliers.
I thought you were only 27, David.
No, unfortunately not. But 27 years, OEMs, and then pursuing a passion for data and people and customer experience, which led me to Quantum 5 earlier this year, where I run all of our enterprise relationships with OEMs and large dealer groups.
I'm Daniel Gover. I'm the general manager at Mercedes-Benz of Easton in Columbus, Ohio, part of the Germain group. And I also thought when Kyle reached out to me and said I was going to put you on this panel about training, I said, I'm pretty deep with NCM pretty much. And he goes, well, that's good. You're going to be with Fleming Ford. And I was like, I don't know. Okay, sounds great. Like a whole store.
You did get on the call and you're like, oh, you're not a dealership. Yeah.
First thing, yeah.
So thanks, Daniel. So Daniel, let's start with that. I know we've talked a little bit about the kind of like your concept about training your people, and it's actually like a pretty big budget item for you. What's your philosophy behind that, and why do you see like a big ROI on that?
It starts when we're recruiting. We want to know that who we're bringing on board wants to learn. Not only is learning like a key factor for engagement for us, but being able to provide people with better tools to do their jobs better, faster, and then your more engaged team members also want to grow and have more responsibilities. It became clear to us that the more people wanted to be engaged with training, the more they're going to be able to provide, the more than we can provide them. It becomes much more symbiotic. They become way more engaged with us, and they can grow and become future leaders with us. And so for us being able to know that from the beginning, it wasn't a question of whether or not we were willing to send people to training. It's, we showed at our year-end, what you're referring to, we showed at our year-end presentation last year that after construction and, real estate costs, that training was our largest expense.
And I want to point out, which I think you're alluding to, is you're actually using training to help recruit talent because it's part of your hiring process. So there's a lot of conversations around that.
It's a lot of the things that we hear is like, I don't get this at my, because we ask, it's like if you're coming to us, first of all, it's just like if I appraise your car, I don't want to just knock down the value of your car. It's something you bought. I'd like to ask you, what did you like about your car? So if someone's coming to us to work, same thing. What do you like about where you are currently? And what would you like to see more of? And a lot of the things are like, I would like specialized training from people that have experience in what it is that I'm doing. And so, from very much the onset, like that became something that we knew that we could offer people, that we're very much integrated. Like I said, with NCM, it becomes it's the language that we use. So if you're doing a one-on-one, with our department managers, the language that we talk about is, if you're in parts, have you done parts 1 yet? Have you done parts 2 yet? When are we scheduled for parts 3? And then that becomes kind of common between our associates to be talking along the same language. Hey, I've been to parts 2. Have you been to service advisor 2 yet? And things like that.
Thanks for filling up our classes. But I do want to also point out that their training approach really works. I mean, they are a top place to work in their market, and they also are the #1 Mercedes store in the area. So How far area?
Our geographically, it would go from central Illinois through Indiana through Ohio. As Mercedes looks at it, our market kind of goes central Ohio, like Knoxville, West Virginia, and like that. Either one, we'd.
Like that? Everyone got that geography lesson, right? Okay.
I mean, ask Mercedes how they came up with that. It's not clear to us either.
Now, David, Quantum 5 has a really interesting approach to training, and it really kind of is foundationally on the sustainability of training, and that classroom workshops and training is kind of the beginning of the training. Can you share a little bit about that? Absolutely,
and that's what we would like to say is our secret sauce is the sustainability and community aspect of training. And so if I would just back up for a second, I mean, every dealer out there has great intentions in terms of training and employee development. Some have more robust programs than others. But the reality is people need to learn, and the way we learn has changed so radically in the last 5 years. And we could even go back further with the onslaught of the smartphone and the way we consume content. And so at Quantum 5, we believe that everything starts with engagement in a community and then tethering people to a training platform via their mobile device. So we can constantly push training that can be consumed by the student on their own time. And it's all pushed in what we call snackable content. So we don't push, 20, 30, 45-minute sessions out. We push out 20, 30, 45-second snapshots that are consumed on your mobile device. And so when a dealership employee is getting dressed in the morning, shaving, sitting at a stoplight on their way into the dealership, they can consume the training content. And behind that training content is a whole community that they're tethered to work together as a team. And I really think that microburst learning is definitely the wave of the future. I mean, one of the hardest things we have at NCM is how do we lose our employee for a day or two to learn the content and get better, but also once they leave, what's the support group behind it to help them kind of retain that knowledge, try new things out, and also support each other? So thank you. Now, Grace, you love and are passionate about kind of growing your own talent. And I know Beaux-Arts is really great at their apprenticeships and their programs and their leadership development. Can you share a little bit about the philosophy of not going out and getting talent, but actually growing your own?
Absolutely. So we have been pretty successful with developing our own technicians for many years. So we have a technician development program that I think started about 8 years ago.
Share with everybody how many technicians you have.
We have 198.
Just a small number, yeah.
And so primarily our technicians are grown from within. So we have a slogan of win from within, and it's definitely a mindset that we have all around. So then a few years ago, we noticed that we have this great intentionality with our technicians and growing them. Why can't we have that same level of commitment around the entire dealership in every single department available for every single employee? So we've done a lot of work to change our minds about training, because a lot of us, when we say the word training, we already have a connotation in our head of what that is. It might be you sitting in a classroom learning something. It might be, you might immediately think, oh, it's an online class. But we literally on the whiteboard crossed out everywhere where we wrote training, and we replaced it with the word development, because we wanted to develop people as far as they individually wanted to go. So each of us and everyone in here has what's called growth needs strength, which is our own need for growth in our work, like as part of our satisfaction with our work. And some people have a higher need than others. Like everyone here in this room has a very high need of growth because they've all chosen to leave work and come here. And your employees also have that desire for growth, and some of them more than others. So we wanted to find ways to give them as many resources to be successful in their jobs as possible. And it's still very much a work in progress, but it's like a fun progress. It's fun.
Well, and I think, to really kind of tap into what the workforce is looking for today is that growth and development. And they want it in different aspects and different ways. So it is Technology, definitely utilizing that. The leadership team, they're coaching one-on-one, bringing them in classroom, reviewing books. I know you guys do a lot of that. I want to kind of step back a little bit. What about onboarding? How critical is training during onboarding? So, Daniel, I know you have some different strategies that you could share with the crowd on what works for your group.
Yeah, it's been one of the biggest areas that we needed improvement on, that we've worked on. So I took time out and I studied with SHRM, with SHRM, and I would really recommend anyone that's interested in their people as to consider a resource like that, to understand what people need as a hygiene for their environment and what conditions help them attach to what they're going to go work for. Because we want people that would like run to work and not just have to drag themselves to work. And we had to, because we're car guys essentially, so we had to like go backwards in the process, and the biggest things that were holding people back from doing training were things that we had to get rid of entirely, right? Like if you're in a dealership where the mantra is like, we're not going to spend that much on training them because they've only been here for 6 months, and what if they take it and leave? And honestly, it was something I hadn't even thought of until people told that to me. It was like a real concern. I said, you know what? Then people will know that people who have left Mercedes-Benz of Easton come with a lot of training, and it makes them that much more valuable in the workforce. And so, but when we hire them, let's make sure that we actually are putting time into the job description. And since most people aren't going to read the whole job description, we want one of two things. One, if it's a detail-oriented position, I want in the job description, there has to be something, like frequent one that we use is kind of towards the bottom. Please include in your cover letter what your favorite dessert is and why. And I don't care what you tell me your favorite dessert is. You could tell me it's Caterpillars. I don't care. But you read it and you actually told me something. I know you actually paid attention, and answering that was important to you. But when you start with us, first of all, like your first day isn't about like getting stuff ready. Like your first day, I need you to be able to start. You need to have a sense of accomplishment from day one. And I'm not saying you have to go and like rework the entire network, but day one when you start is not about you waiting to get your logins for everything. So by the time you've started with us, you have access to all of the training items that you're going to have access to. And the reason I mentioned the job descriptions is an important step that we put in that cost nothing, that had the biggest lift for us, was having our new hires sign their job description. And whether or not you read it, maybe you spent a lot of time reading it, maybe you didn't really read it. I know that happens, but I want you to know that we spent the time to put this together. And this is going to be the basis as we start out. This is the basis of our relationship with you and yours with us. You want to know how you're progressing. You want to know if you're doing, well in our eyes. This is the roadmap for you to do that. So let's read it together, make sure you understand it, and sign it. And then we set up these target dates so that we're adding a little bit more responsibility for you at the end of your first 30 days, the end of your first 60 days, and then at the end of your first 90 days, you should have additional responsibilities there. And the check-in point is with your manager to know that, like, if at 90 days you're just getting to the point of where you need it to be for your job description, then we kind of need to think about training, or if we need to kind of put you in a position where we can train you better to get to there. Or ideally at 90 days, you're now past where you were already from when we hired you and you started the job.
And I think this is such a critical step that we tend to skip in the dealership. So onboarding is not, hey, go follow Mike around and he'll tell you what to do. Okay. Onboarding is also not orientation. It's not the paperwork. It's not the fill out the benefits. Onboarding is building the connection, making them feel like they're growing, making sure they feel seen, valued, and part of the team, and gain confidence through productivity. So the 30, 60, 90-day check-ins, great tip to implement in your program. So thank you. Now, I want to talk a little bit about kind of the elephant in the room, which is everybody who's selling cars and making a ton of money might not be a really great salesperson coming into this next era of automotive. Share with me a little bit about your program, Frictionless Selling and Frictionless Service, and how you're being able to use that to kind of upskill and how that's impacting dealerships.
That's a great lead-in, honestly. Thank you, Fleming. Look, we can look anywhere in society, but probably some of the best examples are what Jeff Bezos has done at Amazon, what the folks at Netflix have done, what any other retailer out there that we engage with has done. And that is they have removed friction from the process, right? And quite frankly, any of us in this room, I would argue, don't have a lot of patience to go through a long selling process. If it takes me more than 30 seconds to reorder I don't know, laundry detergent for my house, then I'm not going to do it, right? And we are seeing the same thing after decades of gradual glacial movement in the auto industry, where the new wave of buyers coming in, kids graduating from college and maybe buying their first vehicle, the idea of sitting them through a 3, 4, or 5 hour sales process in a dealership, it just doesn't work. In fact, actually, I'm looking for him. He's not in the room right now, but I was talking to a former colleague of mine that's here at the show, and his son is out buying his first car right now. And his son basically said, "Dad, this is absolutely ridiculous. Like, why would I go through this process?" And it's just what we've seen. It's been accelerated through the pandemic, but today more than ever, we need, as dealers, we need to lean into this, help our clients, whether they're in a service drive or on the sales showroom floor. We need to help remove those processes and make it easy, allow them to do as much of the selling process as they're comfortable with in their own environment, whether that be online or in the dealership with a sales consultant.
Well, I think, providing the skills to your workforce gives them the confidence to go out and have some of these tough conversations that are looming, to be able to negotiate, to be able to build value. And so really helps us not lose them in the future, because it's going to be a tough road for some of them if they don't have the skills in order to really make the customers feel seen, heard, and connected to.
So I'll give you a really good example. And we were on the phone with a dealer.
We would like a bad example.
Okay, so we're on the phone with a dealer last week, and the dealer says, "I'm not real sure I need your services." We close 45% of the people on our showroom. And we step back, and that's a great closing rate by traditional measurements, right? But when we step back and we look at that, we know for a fact that today, the average number of car dealerships that somebody physically visits, does anybody know the answer to this? 1.8, yeah. It's less than 2. That means that the customer is doing all of their research online. They're figuring out the vehicle they're going to buy before they ever show up at the lot. And so we said to the dealer, we said, okay, you have somebody who has been looking at your vehicle. They've interacted with your dealership online, maybe even on the phone, and they've gone all the way through the process to actually show up at your dealership. And we know they're not going to visit more than one dealership, and you're only selling 45% of them. That means that over 5 out of 10 customers that come in, they're already committed to buying the car when they show up, and you do something to drive them away. Like, that's where the friction comes in, and that's where the opportunity is to reduce the friction in the process and, quite frankly, just have a lot more success in car sales.
Guys, if he told you that they're at a 45%, or they told you they're at a 45% closing ratio, I would respectfully ask them back also, what's your retention percentage? What's your client retention percentage, and what's your team member retention percentage? And do you have any recent engagement scores to go along with that? And then let's at least come to a realization. You're closing at 45% and your sales floor is turning over consistently every 10 months. You either have to be okay with that and say, I own it. Like, we sell cars regardless. We don't necessarily sell second cars, or maybe we do actually need to develop something.
Well, and I think this is important because with every 10% improvement in employee retention, you're gaining a unit a month per sale. I mean, for each person. Plus, you're also, I think, this studies show that in non-luxury, you're gaining like 600,000 in gross a year, and for luxury over $1 million, just by improving retention by 10%. And so connecting with your people, sitting down and coaching your people, helping them grow is really going to not only impact retention, but also the bottom line. So thanks for, and the more metrics you can put around your people, I mean, that's kind of what's going to drive a lot of these results. So, Grace, I want to talk a little bit about the approach that you're not just upskilling them in practical skills they need on the job, but you're also looking at the individual holistically in their kind of life skills. Can you share why that's so important to Beaux-Arts?
I think it's important to us because when we started swapping the word training and development, it made everything so much broader. And so we then divided things into a standardization or an enrichment. So you still have to teach people certain behaviors and teach them processes and have them fulfill those processes. But there's so much more that could add to their job or their life or their ability to do a job that we could train on or develop on that isn't as cut and dry as some of those other training or standardizations. For example, you want to train someone on the trade process. That's kind of like a standardization. This is how you do it. You're going to do it like this every time. But how do you develop someone to be better at building rapport? That's much less cookie cutter and much more intentional in developing those skills and developing opportunities for them to build those skills. So we took that and ran with it, and we've had just so many opportunities to add to the enrichment side of it that we kind of ran with it, and we kept
a little
going.
crazy.
Yeah,
Okay.
we haven't stopped. We're still not stopping. We're just gonna keep going. So
What are some examples of some of the enrichment side?
So we have many opportunities for any employee in the dealership to participate in professional development. So we have 5 classes that any employee can sign up for. We call it the B Top Club, which is best team on the planet, which is another slogan that we have.
Don't steal
that. Yeah, it's already.
Is that trademarked?
It will be soon.
I know it will be.
Just kidding. But so any employee can sign up for that, and it's 5 sessions, so they have to commit to 5 months of in-person, in-class training. It's usually an hour and a half to 3 hours, and they talk about things like self-development. We do a DISC assessment. We read a book about being an ideal team player by Patrick Lencioni. We talk about leadership fundamentals, and that kind of kickstarts them to be able to move past that. So that's kind of your prerequisite to be able to continue on. Then we have an entire leadership academy that would take someone almost a year, if not more, to fully complete, where they have the opportunity to read several different books, participate in different leadership experiences. We even do kind of some speaker series. We did ice baths last week, which was fun. We do all kinds of crazy things. So it might have a touch of wellness. It might have a touch of work. And it might even, hopefully, as we continue to grow this, it might have not anything to do with work. Maybe you learn a language, or you get better at managing your finances, or maybe you learn how to use Excel a little better, or maybe there's something else that we haven't thought of yet that we think of that it's not necessarily required for your job, but it would be great for you to have in life.
No, I love that. And I think that's so important because if, and as we're heading into goal setting season for next year, have your teams make their goals for the year, but also have them add a personal goal. Because if you can really understand what's personal to them and what they want to grow and how they want to develop, that's going to help you really connect and retain them as a leader. So to that point, I want to talk a little bit about mental health because it's somewhat becoming a crisis. 1 in 4 people will experience a mental health stressor this year, which means it may not be your employee, but it may mean they're living with somebody. And so being able to coach your leadership team to understand maybe when there are dips in performance, hey, what's going on, not, hey, you're fired. There's a place that we can step in and fill that gap and really help people with their whole lives be more successful. Daniel, I know one of the stories you were sharing with me, which I thought I want to kind of touch on with everybody, is so Daniel sends his general managers to our general manager executive program, which is a year long. They're not with me a whole year, but you know what I mean. He actually was it a cashier? Or receptionist? Who did you?
I was a title clerk that we were going to promote to be in an office manager position. She's the last graduate from GMEP.
And what was the reason for kind of exposing someone it's not the next step, but what was your reasoning behind that?
Because she deals with all the departments. And you have a lot of people, like if you ask people in the dealership, like, why do you do this? I'm not saying like whatever, you're in accounting, you're journaling something. Why do you do it? That's how I was taught. Why do you do it that way? That's how we do it. And that's a legitimate answer to a degree, right? But it's like they also don't understand what's important necessarily to the other departments. So when she went to, she understands how to reconcile our part statement, which if you have any franchise, but definitely a Highline franchise, if you can reconcile your part statement, that's already an associate's degree. But then she understands right? Those are all the people that suffer with me. Like,
anybody would like to join him with his associates program?
What is this charge for small tools? Why is that on my? and there's how did I buy, is this a tractor? Anyway, so there's, for her to be able to understand like that, these are the things that matter in parts, and this is why it matters to my parts manager. So it's like I can understand, it's relationships. I understand now better what's important to you, and she understands that there's inventories now in every department. Service has an inventory of hours. They have a multiplier based on their efficiency. This is what work in process does to them. Like, so to gain the exposure for it and understand it in the different departments. And then part of the course too is like you work in the different departments. So that was for her to be able to see like what matters for them, how quickly something gets closed, how quickly something gets reconciled. The better like you see how it matters, what you're doing affects other people. When you see it from their position, you become this via empathy and reciprocity, become better at what you're doing. And she got a lot of that from GMEP. She graduated out of my birthday, actually.
Well, happy birthday.
Well, it's not today.
Should we
but I mean,
sing?
thank you.
All right.
Anyway, right. Thanks, David. David goes, check, wish Daniel happy birthday.
Tell everybody when your birthday is so they can tell you next year.
It's June 24th.
Okay, everybody got that?
Ed's going to do this right now.
So what's your thoughts on, to me, I think this is a big opportunity, like if something you could take away and go back with is how do you cross-sell? Because I think not only is the cross-selling critical for talent building the bench, but also for breaking down the silos that we're kind of really, very well known for. And there's a lot of finger pointing and, oh, you did this and you did this. How can cross-selling, in your opinion, David, really help build better team collaboration, help really recognize, where opportunities are to work together with the different teams?
That's such a great question. And before I answer that, though, I just want to commend these guys. I mean, you've developed tremendous programs in your dealerships to really grow your employee base and get them tied to your organization. So I think that that's huge. And that is really the answer to longevity in not just the car business, but any business. And that is sense of community with your employees. So cross-training, just working across the board inside the dealership and learning that's job one in tearing down those silos and building a tighter relationship between your departments. And I think it's really interesting. If we look at service advisors for a second, it's undoubtedly, first off, it's the highest turnover position in the dealership, okay? And it's the hardest job. Think about the service advisors. They got to be at work at 7. They're writing their first RO at 7:15. They are calling back customers by 10. They maybe get a bite of lunch. And
everyone's mad at them.
And everybody hates them. Nobody's coming into your service drive because they want to be there, right? And then they have to stick around till 6 o'clock in the evening to deliver cars, walk people over to the cashier, and review ROs. It, quite frankly, it's a shitty job. Excuse the language, but it's just terrible. Nobody wants to do it, right? But what if you could take your sales staff and train them to maybe redeliver the car at the end of the day, maybe train the sales staff to help out with the advisors. It gets them reconnected with the car they sold 6, 9, 12 months ago, gives them an opportunity. Like, those are some of the things that we're seeing progressive dealers work on today. And I think it's amazing. And you can do the same thing with the people in your service drive, giving them the opportunity to work out in the dealership and meet people on the, and it just, quite frankly, allows a lot of cross-pollination in the dealership, which is good for the entire organization and builds a stronger culture.
Well, and I think it's interesting because the culture and having that culture of learning and coaching is really what is kind of separating a lot of the good from the bad. And when I've had dealers say, well, if I teach them that, Fleming, they'll want that job. So there's this kind of fear, but actually the more they understand, as I think, Daniel, you were talking about, the more they understand other people's jobs, the more empathy they have to working together.
Yeah, it's actually about how similar they are. And it's like the one thing I was just, Did
you have a moment?
It's just like we started doing sales training with our service advisors because coming up on the variable side and then really understanding fixed and falling in love with fixed operations. And it's that when you start to get like a bigger view of the dealership, you're all selling. Some of you are selling a car, some of you are selling parts to the car, some of you are selling the ownership experience, but you're all selling. And if you ask your advisors, like, what do you have? If somebody gives you an objection, And the first thing is like, well, what's an objection? It's like, well, that's a good point. Mostly it's a complaint, but like, let's start with the difference between a complaint and an objection. And it's mind blowing for them. And if you, I guess the only, and sorry, I didn't want to, if you can't be, if it's a cost thing, if you can't be generous from that regard, be generous with your time. Because your advisors will really, like, if you have a sales manager, like I was blessed with some really great sales managers, and they can go in and talk about guest experience with your advisors, and they can talk about the things that matter, you know, especially in luxury. And you can start giving advice. If somebody tells you they have to check with their spouse, what do you do, right? And it's usually like, well, we tell them this is the important stuff you have to do now. And then when you come back, you know, we want to look at this, this, and this. And I'm like, but don't you want more, like a whole paycheck right now? So like, then they've never heard that. They've never heard objection training before. So getting, as much as, yeah, I want the sales team helping the advisors 100%, I also want my advisors to be treated like salespeople, because they are, and have them know sales skills.
That's like, I used to have a dealership, and one of their values was we are all salespeople. And it was just kind of how they all had that mindset. So I love that. The service advisor role, I think, whenever I'm in a dealership and I'm kind of checking the health of the dealership, I start with the service advisors, because if you can make that stick, it kind of gives me an indication of they're treating them right, they're teaching them right, and that must be the culture of the store. Because service advisors, poor things, we don't teach them how to have difficult conversations or deliver bad news. So what do? They avoid it. And that's when you start getting the complaints that rise all the way up to the GM.
Or just they're bad news bears the whole time.
Yes, well, yeah, because that's all they're hearing, but they don't know how to take it to an opportunity. So I think what you're doing is spot on. So in terms of cross-selling, and I would say almost like you're sharing knowledge, but actually from your senior team, because it's part of the culture that everyone has committed to. We are all here to train and develop the next round or the next legacy of working at Beaux-Arts. I think that's a challenge for a lot of dealerships, because you know, a lot of C-techs or a lot of the top salespeople are like, why do I have to help? How do I make money on that? How did you change the culture or get your teams excited to be part of the mentorship or apprenticeship to help develop all of your next gen staff?
I think that there's probably a lot of things that we've done along the way to accomplish that. But as far as cross-training goes, I see that as like such a huge opportunity that we probably haven't quite figured it all out yet. I did a few focus groups when I was developing some of the stuff, and Ed and I worked together to bring different people from different departments, and unanimously they asked if they could learn more about what other departments do.
I'm going to interrupt you. Ask your people what they want. Focus groups are such a free, great way to learn. Don't guess what training they need. Don't guess what they're looking for. Go ahead and ask them. So it really sets you up to know.
They one gentleman brought it up, and they were all like, "Yeah, that would be so cool if we could do that." And so then I was like, "Well, how would you like me to do that?" So if you guys could bring any more ideas, that would be great. You know. So I think I mentioned that earlier. I don't know quite how we could get that yet. I think there's definitely a way to get kind of those experiences happening around the whole dealership. But I think it's that culture that you mentioned of us kind of prioritizing these things has grown along the way. And our management it's important to them. And now with these leadership courses and BTOP Club and these developmental opportunities that they have, our employees get to sit in a room. It's completely voluntary. No one is required to do any of it. So anyone can sign up, and you might be in a classroom with 8 to 10 people from all these different departments, and you're talking about the DISC assessment. So then you start talking about, okay, well, I'm an S, and this is how it shows up in my work life, situations. And then someone else goes, oh, well, I'm a C, and this is how it shows up in my job, because my job's different. And you start creating these really cool conversations that unintentionally, but it happens, are between departments, and they start to learn and become more vulnerable with each other and build that community like you've mentioned a couple times.
And I think, I would really, encourage this, because having somebody in service or somebody in the front that you can go talk to when you have an issue and not turn it into the blame game that turns so many cultures toxic, is we have to help them build the relationships. I always encourage my GMs to pull like 6 or 7 people from different departments every couple of weeks and just ask them questions. What's going on? How can we help? What are the biggest challenges? And have them talk to each other. And now we're starting to break down those silos. So that's really important in building positive culture and a learning culture. I want to ask, I know a few of the dealer groups in here, Judy, Ed, David, what were some of the biggest challenges that you faced when changing the culture to this kind of learning culture, helping each other out from a culture that we've all grown up in, which is like, what's in it for me? For those that are still wanting to make this transition. Anything that you could give as advice in terms of how you did that or how you got everybody on board? Because I think that's what I would be thinking about if I was in the audience. Sharing the vision.
Truly, they want to protect themselves. This is what got me here. This is what allowed me to be who I am. And sharing the vision of how we can all pull together and help each other is instrumental in getting them all to buy into it. So some of your biggest resistors become your biggest supporters when you get them to buy in.
So how do I fit into the dealership why? And what's my purpose here? And how do I align to the vision? So awesome. That's very good advice.
It's making the time. So like with advisors, they don't have the time really to train. So with a lot of we divide it into groups, and then we'll say on Wednesday morning at 9 o'clock, we're doing Zoom, and we're going to train together.
Now, also, this is a good question. Are we paying for their time or in California? Yeah, well, everything's different in California, David. But I mean, I think that's important. Like, we're investing in you. We're not asking you to come do this for free. We see you as an asset to this organization, and it really shows that you're investing in them by paying their wages. So, David.
Role clarity and alignment.
Ooh, role clarity and alignment. What do you mean?
Alignment means that everybody is bought in to the role that they have. There's a clear delineation by department, so that there's no confusion.
I think confusion kills the cat. Yeah. So really being clear with what expectations are, and I think even beyond that, holding people accountable to it. So we train people to things, but then we don't always know how to have that accountability conversation to keep them on track to the vision. So Daniel, when you think about the next phase of automotive, what are some things you're excited about, or if you had your dream, what would the training program look like?
The next, I guess, the next phase of automotive, like in terms of what for us, or I mean, we're consistently expanding, and it's on the basis of the people that we have, and it's the ability to continue to question and redefine roles, and to question the status quo continuously, and why, and just because isn't like a good enough answer. And so for us to be able to continue to redefine those things, and what I think about is like, what I ask my managers to do is, so if you're a sales manager at your store, or at least in our store, like I expect you to know your inventory, whether it's aged, whether it's fresh, how old is it, what's your next step on it, what leads you have working on it, things like that. And I should be able to have a conversation with you about it. I walk around right now and I can think about my team members as far as what their next stage in training is going to be. And I'd like that to be sort of pervasive in our management culture, to know that, and then work on a basis of truly like a growth-oriented performance organization that supports our team members. In our store, I've got 3 of our really great guys from our store here. If you're an employee, it's almost a dig, honestly. It's like it's the basic level of someone coming into work if you're an employee. And same thing if you're a customer, like that would be the least. That's, you're a client and you're a team member truly, because we do want to talk about team. I'd like to get rid of some things that can tend to be toxic, even though they don't mean to be. Like, I'm careful to not call us a family, that has a lot of connotations to it that we learned about when we kind of went down the path of learning mental health with our associates. I'd like to get rid of, dispel some of those things. And I'd like us to be able to understand that, yeah, you start out with a role, and sometimes ideally, that role does become a person. So, I'll embarrass the living crap out of him right now because he's that humble. But so Tack is our inventory manager and started with us during COVID and just graduated from The Ohio State University. And from there, I didn't graduate high school, so I don't care. You guys can
We can
talk
fight
about
it out
college all
later.
you want. But graduated with a degree in hospitality, but he's a car nut, right? And he's our inventory manager that he builds our new cars, which is pretty complex with Mercedes. He handles dealer trades. He appraises cars. He wholesales cars. He arranges for transports. He can even come up with retail deals that he'll then bill out and knows how to go through the finance process. We have a relationship with NetJets. He manages basically that relationship for me with NetJets. And I know in my head what the next thing the TAC's going to need to do. If I just tell you I need an inventory manager, there's no way I get a TAC. But TAC wasn't an inventory manager when he started either, right? So it's like, to be able to have that adaptability, I'd like us to be able to redefine roles that we have in the dealership and give ourselves the flexibility to give us what the best end result is and not just be bound by what was written in the job.
And what's been the job titles for the last 50 years. And I think that's a really great way to look at what is the strengths of your team, what skills do they need to get better and maximize themselves. And that really does kind of come down to, are you spending time with them? I'll kind of go back to Ed's conversation earlier. Are you spending enough time with them to know what their strengths are and know what their skills needs and what their wants are in terms of where they want to go in their career? So when you talk about coaching and one-on-one coaching, let's kind of like wrap up with, how do you see one-on-one being so impactful as a training tool and also as a retention tool?
Yeah, I'll take that one. So without a doubt, you need presence. And I love hearing Daniel's comments about knowing the people in the dealership. We do, at our organization, we do a lot of employee surveys and we collect a lot of data. And the number one piece that we get is, I need more presence from my leadership team. Sales, service, technicians, parts departments, they all uniformly say, I need a better relationship with my general manager. So it starts with being present and knowing the people and connecting with them and listening to them. Full stop.
No, awesome. And I think that is probably the hardest thing for all of us to kind of go, is how do we get scalability so that we can have time to be present? Because we are very busy in the stores. How have you helped develop the leadership team so that they are spending time being present and coaching and really identifying the talent that is in front of them?
I think that it's been a big intentionality that the entire team, starting from the top, has pushed down of spending that time with their people and how important kind of that feedback is and those relationships and how much the employee wants that relationship and that feedback, because some jobs have inherently no feedback. Some jobs do. You fix a car and it turns on, and there's some level of feedback that what you've done was a good job. But there's a lot of jobs and roles that we have that don't have any inherent feedback. So that relationship is so important for their satisfaction just every day at work, and then that builds the culture. Because if you lack that in the very beginning of the employee, then they're not going to be engaged in all the rest of the things that you try to offer them.
Well, I think that's just a great example of taking the values off the wall and putting them into behaviors and doing it through your leadership team. Daniel? Yeah,
just one thing that we're passionate about is with one-on-ones, which we actually really learned with NCM, and that a one-on-one is be specific about what a one-on-one is. It's not a performance review. And the first form we started with was the form from NCM, and we've let every manager sort of change that to how they feel, or they can start with that or they can change it. But you're asking things like, do you have what you need to do your best job every day? And where do you see yourself, and to understand both strengths and weaknesses. But it's there's hygiene requirements. You have to be separated from earshot. It can only be a conversation between the two of you. And it's one of the only conversations we'll encourage managers to have without a second person there, right? Close the door, have a conversation, or walk around the lot and have a conversation. As long as there's just the two of you, then you have to have a conversation. And initially I was getting one-on-ones that had technicians' hours and efficiency reports on there. And I'm like, no, I need what happens before that. And they're like, well, what do you mean what happens before that? I'm like, well,
what do you mean?
Right. So it's you have to add, so that's a one-on-one. We interview people and they tell us I have one-on-ones all the time. I have an open door policy. I'm like, no, you're having conversations, but you're not investing into somebody and giving them you're not leaving a portion of yourself with those people. And to answer your next question, sir, then it is a terminatable offense. I have terminated a manager for not completing one-on-ones. It's required in your job description to complete one-on-ones in your department once per team member every month. And I just transferred somebody out of our shop in a leadership position also, because I'm the stop to say, like, if you're not getting a one-on-one with your manager, you need to come see me. And that happened too many times. And so we have terminated off of that, and we have also transferred responsibility for people, because it is, in case anyone was wondering, it is that important to us that you sit down with your people and talk to them.
We also made a similar shift of a one-on-one is not for you to talk about the things that they're measured by. It's an opportunity for the manager to ask them questions, for the employee to self-discover where they need to be moving. The manager may ask, what struggles are you having right now that I haven't heard of, or what's going on in your personal life that maybe is causing issues, or just talk to me about what's going on. Is something over here not working, or more questions and more listening rather than telling.
And I think that's the real secret to coaching, because coaching isn't a conversation. It's really about asking and helping self-discover. And I think a lot of times managers are like, what? I talk to them every day. I'm like, not about the game. Have you talked to them about them? Like, what are they doing? Yes?
So if you're doing the one-on-ones and it's not a performance review, how are you keeping track that actually happened?
Yeah, we recently, we were doing it first via just email with a form that would get scanned back to us. We now have a system called Rever, which I think used to be e-file cabinet or not that Rever's a great name, but had a worse name prior to that. But it's an HR specific document tracking system, and every team member, past, present, has a folder in there. Rever actually will prompt you, and it'll say, like, hey, it's time to do your one-on-one with Michael, and here's that form that you need to do, and then it comes back to us and it goes into that file. As a manager, you're not allowed to initiate disciplinary action against any of your team unless I can see 90 days, meaning at least 3 one-on-ones prior to that, because there's mindset that went into that. I'm not saying, like, if somebody ran over somebody crossing the street, I don't need to read one-on-ones for that, right? But like,
why did you do that?
Right.
Tell me about how you feel.
We're not like that gentle parenting, right? I mean, and, so it's just, but I need to see if you're going to say that, like, so-and-so, because if your managers are going to sit around and be like, so-and-so sucks. That's such an attitude. And it's like, right, like, it's that bad. I should be able to, I should have been seeing this for the last, every single one-on-one. You're sitting down with them and being like, hey, why do you hate being here? Please leave. It's not prison, right? But it's like, if I don't see that, then what are you talking about? So then if I go to talk to this person and say, you're pretty negative. Seems like you just hate being here. What are you talking about? Like, that's not me. Like, who's trying to paint me like that? Well, I need to have these conversations, need to be there. And you, a manager, if you're then also, you're accountable too. If you permitted it to happen, whatever the undesirable behavior is, you documented it and you permitted it to continue happening. Why were you doing that?
No, and I love that with managers, because I think they live in hope-a-land. They hope the problem will go away. They hope someone else will handle it, or they hope, the person doesn't come back to work. So, yes.
So it sounds like non-negotiables. Are they written? Is that something that...
One-on-ones?
You guys hear that? She's asking if non-negotiables are written.
Yeah, one-on-ones are in the job description as for managers, and it's in their pay plan. That it would include up into, and it's not, I don't incentivize for it or de-incentivize for it, but it is meant. One of the best things I heard Adam Robinson from Hireology say like a million years ago was like, if it's a fireable offense, it should be a hireable offense. So then I want to tell you, when you get hired, like, this is something you're going to have to do. And usually we have to teach that, because like I said, most people in the car business come to us and they're like, oh, I had an office manager candidate tell me that, like, we sit on the floor and cry. And I was like, for any particular reason, or just... There's crying in car sales? Like, what? In general, or what? And so it's like, no, you need to actually learn. This is how I want you to do it.
So, other questions?
Comment first. I think this was fantastic.
Thank you so much.
It was extremely informative.
They're pretty smart people.
Back to what you were talking about before about getting people to work cohesively and training and all that. I think a lot of it goes back to compensation plans and car dealerships as well. They're siloed, right? You have 4, 5, 6 different departments that are set up. If people have part of their comp plans that are holistically driven around car sales or CSI or reviews or just working together, I think that helps quite a bit. The other comment that I wanted to make too was, you talked about having a frictionless sales process in your store. I think we were going that direction prior to COVID, and then at the beginning of COVID, definitely, because we were forced to do it, but because of low supply in a high gross environment, a lot of the habits of the car dogs and the car people that are back in the industry. But I think as grosses go down over the next year or two, we'll probably see some of these conversations probably start to back.
Absolutely, which is why I think it's so important to really think about your training strategy in order to handle that gap. So, anything else before we wrap up?
To that, my service advisors just didn't know. I just had this last week. My service advisors thought that policy was like, I don't know if you've ever seen that episode of Schitt's Creek where it's like, it's a write-off. And it's like, who writes it off? I don't know, the write-off department. Like, that's what they thought. That's exactly what they thought policy was. So they didn't and this was something that was so obvious to me. Like, I've never would think that but our sales managers, obviously, like, I allow them a great deal of freedom with policy because I don't want that to be a friction point with clients. But at some point, like, it's affecting their gross. They want to know why it's happening, and they don't. And then the advisors didn't understand why that was something that was so pressing. They legitimately thought this was just like goodbye land. Like, I made this problem go away. How'd you do it? I put it into policy. Oh, okay. Well, he makes less money because of that. So do you understand where that might be a problem, right? And it's like, oh my God, I never knew that. And my fault, right?
I think it's an interesting point. I mean, we're seeing compression in the industry right now as inventory levels build, and I mean, all the headwinds that are coming back around on us right now. I am extremely confident that the best way to protect gross and protect the brand of a dealership and grow overall is through a superior experience. I mean, we can all think about it. We're all willing to pay for a premium experience, whether it's going out to dinner or an online purchasing experience or an interaction with a friend. I mean, we will all pay for a better experience, and so will dealership customers. Quite frankly, it's that simple.
Well, I want to please join me in thanking Daniel, David, and Grace because they spent valuable time, and I think they were a big help.